James Thompson had always prided himself on running Horizon Airways with a visionary mind and an uncompromising commitment to excellence. From his penthouse office in Chicago, he received glowing reports from his executives. Profit margins were up, passenger numbers were steady, and customer satisfaction scores remained high. His airline was an industry leader, a symbol of reliability. So why the hell was social media flooded with complaints? Why were passengers describing his airline as a nightmare of delays, indifferent service, and exhausted crews? And more importantly, why was he hearing whispers, anonymous reports from insiders about overworked employees, unsafe schedules, and plummeting morale? Something was wrong, and he wasn't going to get the truth from polished reports or scripted boardroom presentations. So for the first time in over a decade, James Thompson was about to set foot on one of his own planes, not as a CEO, but as Ethan Brooks, an unremarkable businessman in cheap jeans, a hoodie, and a fake beard. His heart raced as he adjusted the disguise in a dimly lit airport bathroom, the weight of his decisions sinking in. If I'm going to fix this, he muttered to himself, I need to see it with my own eyes. The Horizon Airways first-class lounge at Chicago O'Hare International Airport was not what James expected. The leather seats were worn, the self-service coffee machine was out of order, and the attendant behind the desk looked like they were one rude customer away from walking out mid-shift. He lingered near the counter, observing passengers grumbling about delays and staff whispering among themselves, and muttered, if corporate cared, we wouldn't be drowning out here. James's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent, his disguise his only shield. He approached the counter, expecting the kind of elite VIP treatment he envisioned for his airline's most valued customers. Excuse me, he said, keeping his voice neutral. I was wondering if there's an update on the flight to Dallas. The woman behind the counter barely glanced at him. Delayed another hour. James frowned. Is there a specific reason? Her tone was flat, disinterested. Weather or maintenance? Not really sure. Not really sure? James bit his tongue. If he were here, as CEO, she'd be fired on the spot. Instead, he nodded. All right, thanks. She had already turned away. What the hell is happening to my airline? He lingered a moment longer, overhearing her mutter to a colleague. They keep cutting staff, but expect us to smile through it. I'm done. The words stung like a slap. Was this the culture he'd allowed to fester under his watch? When they finally called for first-class boarding, James was relieved. That relief lasted exactly 15 seconds. The jet bridge was crowded with economy passengers, despite priority boarding. People were shoving, sighing, and blocking the way. An older woman with a cane was struggling, while a young man in a Horizon uniform, one of his employees, just stood there, scrolling on his phone. James clenched his jaw. This was unacceptable. He wanted to intervene, to demand the employee help, but Ethan Brooks wouldn't do that. He forced himself to stay in character, his frustration boiling beneath the surface. Finally stepping into the aircraft, he expected at least some warmth from the flight crew. Instead, he was met with tired eyes and forced smiles. Welcome aboard, a flight attendant muttered, barely looking at him. James glanced at her name tag, Emma Wilson. No relation, obviously. Emma turned away before he could respond. James made his way to seat 1B and barely had time to settle in before he noticed another problem. First class was filthy. Crumbs on the seat beside him, a used napkin still stuffed in the tray table, the window smudged with fingerprints. He exhaled slowly. If this was first class, what the hell was economy like? He pressed the call button, curious to see how long it would take for a response. Nothing. He pressed again. Still nothing. Across the aisle, another passenger muttered, "Good luck getting service around here." A man across the aisle was pressing the call button repeatedly. A minute passed, then 2. No response. Finally, Emma returned, but instead of assisting, she simply leaned over and turned off the button without even looking at him. James watched in stunned silence. Had customer service really fallen this far? The man snapped, "Hey, I was trying to get some help." Emma's eyes flashed with exhaustion. "Sir, we're short-staffed, you'll have to wait." Her tone was sharp, and James felt a pang of guilt. Was this what his employees were reduced to? By the time the flight took off, James's frustration had settled into something heavier, disbelief. But nothing prepared him for what happened next. Seated just behind him, Emma and another flight attendant, Claire Evans, were speaking in low, exhausted voices. James wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but once he heard his own name, he froze. Claire scoffed, "A CEO of this airline, please. The man sits in his damn skyscraper collecting profits while we break our backs." Emma chuckled. "You think he even knows what we go through? He doesn't give a..." James felt his stomach turn. Claire leaned in. "Did you hear about Sophie Reed?" God, yeah. I still can't believe it, Emma said. They worked her like a dog, Claire. I saw her the day before. She could barely stand. James's grip tightened on the armrest. Claire lowered her voice. They're covering it up. Do you know how many double shifts she worked that week? She was exhausted, and corporate knew. They got reports about her schedule and did nothing. And when she collapsed, do you think they cared? No, they hushed it up, just like they always do. I heard legal even threatened her family to keep quiet. James's breath caught. Who the hell was Sophie, and what the hell were they talking about? Emma shook her head. And you know what's sick? Nothing will change, because as long as the money keeps rolling in, they don't care. Claire scoffed. I'd love to see that CEO step onto one of these flights just once, see how much he loves his airline then. He'd probably cry before he even took off. Emma laughed. James felt like he'd been punched in the chest. They hated him. Not the CEO, not the leader. Him? And somebody had died? A cover-up? His mouth went dry. He wanted to turn around, demand answers, but he knew that wasn't the way, not yet. Instead, he sat there, heart pounding, ears burning, listening, as his employees ripped him apart. Their words echoed in his mind, each one a dagger. They don't care, they hushed it up, nothing will change. He had come here looking for answers, he had found them, and now everything was about to change. The plane touched down at Dallas/Fort Worth International Airport, but James Thompson barely noticed. His mind was racing. His own employees had just exposed something catastrophic. A cover-up. A death. Exhaustion so severe that it killed one of their own. And he had no idea. For years he had trusted his executives to handle operations, to take care of his people. Now, sitting in the stained first-class seat, he realized the truth. They had failed him, or worse, he had failed them. As the flight taxied to the gate, he forced himself to remain calm. There was no point in acting yet, not until he had more information. But once that seatbelt sign flipped off, he was done playing along. He whispered to himself, "This ends today." James stood peeling off his fake beard and tucking his glasses into his pocket. He turned to face Emma Wilson and Claire Evans, who were gathering their things near the galley. They didn't notice him at first until he spoke. "Emma, Claire." They froze. Emma blinked, confused. Do I know you?" James held their gaze. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, he reached into his jacket and pulled out his real ID, the one with his actual name. He didn't need to say anything. The second Emma read it, her face drained of color. Claire clapped a hand over her mouth. Passengers were still disembarking, but the energy in first class had shifted. A suffocating silence. Emma stammered, "Mr. Thompson, His voice was sharp, cutting. "Don't apologize. I want you to tell me everything, right now." Claire looked horrified. Sir, I didn't mean... "You meant every word," he said coldly. "And that's why I'm listening. You said Sophie's family was threatened. Who did it?" Emma looked away, her hands trembling. James took a step closer. Who was Sophie? The reaction was instant. Emma winced. Claire turned away, her body language screaming fear. James's heart pounded. "I heard what you said. Sophie collapsed from exhaustion, didn't she? And someone covered it up." Claire's throat bobbed. "Sir, we're not supposed to talk about it. They told us we'd lose our jobs if we did." James's voice dropped. "Who told you that?" Neither of them answered. James exhaled, his patience gone. "Fine. If you won't tell me, I'll find out myself." He turned and strode toward the cockpit. Behind him, Emma whispered to Claire, "We're done for." Claire's voice cracked. Or maybe he'll actually do something. The captain and first officer were still in their seats, finishing post-flight procedures. Captain Robert Hayes, a man in his late 40s with graying hair, glanced up with a polite but weary expression. "Sir, when were you going to tell me that one of my flight attendants died?" The cockpit went silent. The first officer looked away. Hayes stiffened. "Mr. Thompson, I think it would be best if we discuss this in private." James's nostrils flared. "Why? Because it's bad for PR?" Hayes sighed. "Because this isn't just about you." James narrowed his eyes. "Then tell me, who would I ask about?" Hayes hesitated, then finally said, "Legal told us not to speak about it. They said it was a liability issue, that talking would tank the company." James's chest tightened. "Legal?" "She collapsed after a flight from Seattle to Miami," Hayes continued in a low, tired voice. "She had been scheduled for back-to-back shifts for nearly 36 hours. She was exhausted. We told management it was a safety risk, but they ignored us." James felt sick. "And then?" Hayes continued. "They swept it under the rug, made it seem like it was just a personal health issue, not work. I tried to push back, but they told me to keep my mouth shut or I'd be out of a job. James's hands curled into fists. They buried it. And he, the CEO of this goddamn company, hadn't even known. Why didn't you come to me directly? He demanded. Hayes met his gaze, unflinching. Because, sir, with all due respect, you're never around. You've been up in that tower for years. We didn't think you'd care. The words hit harder than anything James had heard that day. He stood frozen, the weight of his absence crashing down. James didn't say another word. He simply turned and walked away, the sounds of the terminal blurring into white noise. He needed to act immediately. As soon as he exited the jet bridge, he pulled out his phone and dialed his executive assistant. Mr. Thompson, she answered instantly. How was your... Get me a meeting with the senior leadership team this afternoon. No excuses. A pause. This afternoon, sir. Most of them. I don't give a damn where they are. They'll be there. His assistant hesitated, then sighed. Understood. James hung up. His heart was pounding. His chest ached. This was his company, his responsibility. And now everything was going to change. He stood in the bustling terminal, passengers rushing past, oblivious to the storm brewing within him. I trusted them, he whispered to himself, and they betrayed us all. James Thompson had never felt this kind of rage, not when a Horizon competitor poached one of his best executives, not when the company lost $10 million 0 cents in a failed expansion project, not even when an airline ranking dropped Horizon below American and Southwest. But this was different. A woman had died under his company's watch, and his own people had hidden it from him. Now, as he stepped into a waiting car bound for headquarters, he vowed to tear down the lies, no matter the cost. The Horizon boardroom was sleek, modern, and soundproof, a place designed to discuss $100 million 0 cents deals, not the death of an employee. But tonight, it would become a battlefield. James sat at the head of the long glass table, arms crossed, eyes cold. Across from him sat his top executives, the people he had trusted to run Horizon. Stephen Carter, Chief Operating Officer, was already sweating. Laura Bennett, Chief of Legal, adjusted her tie but said nothing. Karen Lee, Head of Human Resources, sat stiff, her face unreadable. James let the silence stretch, let them feel it. Then he spoke. Sophie Reed? No one moved. She worked herself to death on a Horizon flight, and you covered it up? A muscle in Stephen's jaw twitched. James, I don't... James's voice was razor sharp. Don't lie to me. Stephen exhaled, leaning forward. Look, it's more complicated than that. James tilted his head. Really? Because from what I heard, it sounds pretty simple. She was overworked. She collapsed. And instead of owning up to it, we erased it. Karen finally spoke. James, our legal team... I don't give a damn about legal silence. James' gaze was ice. I care about why the hell my own executives didn't tell me the truth. Rara sighed. Because, James, it would have destroyed us. James let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Destroyed us? You think this rotting corporate cancer, isn't already destroying us? Laura hesitated. Sophie Reed was a person. She had a family, and she died working for me. And you're telling me the only reason I'm hearing about it now is because I disguised myself and got on a goddamn plane? Stephen swallowed hard. James, listen. No, Stephen, you listen. I built this company from nothing, and I won't let it turn into some soulless machine that grinds its people to dust. Karen frowned. So what exactly are you planning to do? James leaned forward, hands on the table. We're going public. The room exploded. James, are you insane? Stephen hissed. This'll tank our stock. Karen snapped. The lawsuits will bury us. Laura added, James, let them yell, let them panic. Then, he said calmly, good, because Horizon deserves the fallout, because Sophie Reed deserves justice. Because our employees deserve to know that their CEO is actually listening. Karen shook her head, standing up. You're making a mistake. Jesus stared at her. No, Karen, I'm fixing one. He turned to Lara. Draft a statement. I want full transparency. No spin, no corporate. Lauren hesitated. James, I think we should wait. Handle this internally. James's patience snapped. And what happens when a journalist finds out? What happens when another employee collapses? What happens when passengers start noticing how dead-eyed and exhausted our crews are? We either own the truth or the truth buries us. Silence. Stephen's face was unreadable. You do this, James, and the board might force you out. James exhaled slowly. Let them try. That night, James barely slept. By 7 a.m., he didn't have to wait for his press conference because the story had already leaked. Someone in that meeting had gone to the press first. Horizon was on every news channel, every business blog, every headline. Inclusive, Horizon Airways allegedly covered up employee death. Former flight attendant's family demands justice. CEO James Thompson under fire. Will you step down? James stared at the screen, rage boiling. His own people had turned against him, and now, instead of controlling the narrative, he was about to face the biggest PR nightmare of his career. He picked up his phone and dialed. "Get me a press conference in 2 hours, no scripts." And the assistant paused. "Sir, are you sure?" James clenched his jaw. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." The Horizon corporate headquarters had never felt this hostile. James Thompson stood behind a heavy oak podium, the company's sleek red and gold logo positioned directly behind him. Cameras flashed, microphones buzzed. This wasn't just a press conference, it was an execution. Reporters crowded the space, their faces expectant, hungry for blood. They weren't here for answers, they were here for his downfall. James tightened his tie, exhaled slowly, and stepped into the fire. And the press conference, a CEO under siege. And he scanned the sea of journalists, cameras trained on him like loaded weapons. "Good morning," James said, his voice steady. Nobody responded. A reporter from the New York Times shot the first bullet. "Mr. Thompson, did you personally order the cover-up of Sophie Reed's death?" James's jaw clenched. "No, I didn't know about it until 24 hours ago, and that is unacceptable." More flashes, more murmurs. Another journalist, this one from Bloomberg, leaned forward. "If you didn't know, Mr. Thompson, then who did?" James's fingers curled on the podium. He knew exactly who. Stephen Carter, Karen Lee, Laura Bennett, his own people, the ones he had trusted. He took a slow breath. The individuals responsible for suppressing this information will be removed from their positions immediately. A wave of shocked gasps swept through the room. Stephen, sitting just off stage, visibly stiffened. Karen crossed her arms, lips tight. But James wasn't done. "I will not protect anyone who values profit over human lives, and I will personally ensure that this company is rebuilt from the ground up, if necessary." The reporters pounced. "Does that mean you're stepping down?" James's eyes darkened. "No." Another voice cut through the chaos. "But your board might force you out." A tense silence filled the room. James held their stares. "They can try." The cameras clicked like machine guns. James had declared war. The moment the press conference ended, James walked off stage, his heartbeat hammering. Stephen was already waiting for him. "What the hell was that?" Stephen hissed, his face red with anger. James barely looked at him. That was leadership. Karen joined them, her voice icy. "You just threw the entire executive team under the bus." "No, Kerry, you threw yourselves under the bus when you buried the truth." Stephen stepped closer, lowering his voice. "James, listen to me. The board isn't happy. They think you're..." James's patience snapped. "I don't give a damn what the board thinks." Stephen scoffed. "You should, because they're calling an emergency vote tomorrow morning." James froze. "A vote?" Karen smirked. "To remove you as CEO." Silence. James's pulse pounded in his ears. Stephen crossed his arms. "Do you really think you can survive this?" James stared at them both, and then he smiled. "Watch me." James stormed into his office, slammed the door, and immediately dialed a number. Claire Evans, the flight attendant who had unknowingly exposed everything. She picked up on the second ring. "Mr. Thompson, I need you and Emma in Chicago tonight." A pause. "Sir, why?" James exhaled. "Because if the board wants to take me down, go and make sure they hear from the people who actually matter." The boardroom at Horizon headquarters had never felt this hostile. James Thompson sat at the end of the long glass table, his expression unreadable. Across from him, 12 board members sat in heavy silence. Some looked nervous, others looked hungry for his downfall. And at the center of it all, Stephen Carter. James had seen this coming for years. Stephen had wanted more power. Now he was seizing the moment, leading this coup against him. Stephen folded his hands. "James, let's get straight to the point." James leaned back, unmoved. "Please do." Stephen cleared his throat. "The company is in crisis. Public trust is plummeting, stock value is unstable, and after your reckless press conference, the board has serious concerns about your leadership." James said nothing. Stephen continued, savoring the moment. We are calling a vote, effective immediately. A beat of silence. James looked around the room. Some board members avoided his eyes, others watched eagerly, waiting for him to break. James sighed, shaking his head. You think this is about stocks and PR? Stephen smirked. James leaned forward, his voice low. No, Stephen, it's about leadership. The boardroom doors opened. All heads turned. Claire Evans and Emma Wilson stepped inside. A murmur rippled across the room. Stephen frowned. What is this? James stirred. This is what leadership looks like. Claire swallowed hard, then faced the board. She hesitated, then spoke. I loved my job once, but Horizon took everything from me. From all of us. Emma nodded. We worked until we collapsed. And when Sophie Rhee actually did, this company erased her like she never existed. Silence. Claire looked straight at Stephen. You think this company's in crisis because of a press conference? No. It's in crisis because of you. Stephen's jaw tightened. James let their words hang in the air, let the board members feel the weight of the truth. Then he looked at them all. So, who do you really want leading this company? Stephen's voice was tight. Let's vote. One by one, the board members spoke. Remove. Remove. Stay. Remove. James felt his heart pounding. Stay. Stay. Remove. 4-3. The next board member hesitated. Then, softly, stay. 4-4. Only 2 votes left. The next one exhaled. Stay. 4-5. James's breath caught. The final vote. A long pause, then James stays. James exhaled. Stephen's face darkened. James turned to him, voice calm. Stephen, you're fired. Stephen's mouth opened, but nothing came out. James didn't wait for an answer. He turned to Karen. Clean house. I want a full audit of labor conditions. Every unethical executive gone. Karen nodded, looking pale. James looked at Claire and Emma. And I want you two leading our employee relations division. Emma blinked. Us. James nodded. You spoke up when no one else did. That's what leadership is. Claire's eyes shone with something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. 18 months later, Horizon Airways was no longer the same company. Work conditions had changed, schedules were safer, employees were heard, passengers noticed a difference, so did the industry. James Thompson had almost lost everything, but instead, he had rebuilt it. As he boarded a Horizon flight, this time as a passenger, a familiar voice greeted him. Welcome aboard, Mr. Thompson. He looked up. Claire and Emma, now in leadership roles. James smiled. For the first time in years, he felt proud of the airline he had built, and this time, he wouldn't stop watching.